Pat and Aaron Show, time for our injury report presented by Florida Orthopaedic Institute in partnership with Tampa General Hospital.
That was the wrong button for the record.
So Pat went to click in our doctor, Dr. Charles Nofsinger, who's going to join us in a second. And I thought for a second that he clicked in Dr. Nofsinger, and he was so excited for the interview. That was Dr. Nofsinger.
That was awesome.
I'm guessing that was Buccaneers John.
It was. And honestly, my immediate reaction was that was Dr. Nofsinger. And
that is my normal response to talking with you guys.
Oh, that was great. All right, well, looking forward to it because we got a lot to get to today. Let's start with Brian Thomas and a chest, because I always wonder with chest issues, and I think a lot of people deal with chest issues. They get scared of what's going on inside their body. He's dealing with a contusion on the left side of his chest. Let's start with that. What is a chest contusion?
Usually that's a rib injury. These guys are taking serious high-velocity hit to the chest wall, and your pads don't necessarily get you much protection down there. So, yeah, he's got a rib contusion, and there are these muscles in between your ribs that also can get bruised. It can be painful.
Especially for a wide receiver, right? He's got to move around a lot. He's got to be reaching for a lot of balls. How much does any kind of muscular injury within that region impact range of motion for a player like a wide receiver?
It can. Usually by the time the next game comes around with the rehab and whatever medication you might be taking, it shouldn't affect him much. The day of the injury can be very challenging, and so a lot of times we'll take him out until we know if those ribs are broken.
Let's speak about that.
Ribs are not broken.
Yeah, let's speak about, you brought up medication, and we know a lot of guys, this is what they'll do to get themselves right for that game. Let's go to Shohei Ohtani. They wrapped up the World Series last night, but the Dodgers did, but he was never himself after the dislocated shoulder during a slide on Saturday night. What happened there? Do you think he'll eventually need surgery on that shoulder? Because he was definitely impacted by it.
Yeah, no question. So I think he subluxed his shoulder, so his shoulder came partially out of the socket. If you watch that video where he's sliding, puts his hand down, and then pushes down on the hand while his shoulder's going down, that's how the shoulder comes out of the socket. If his shoulder came all the way out of the socket, he would be down and would not be walking off the field typically.
He still probably needed a lot of medication to play through those games, I'm assuming. That's what I immediately thought.
No question. And I think the real question is, he's going to come back and pitch next season, right?
Yeah.
That arm motion when you pitch could be too painful for him, and then he might need the surgery. When you sublux your shoulder, you usually do tear the cartilage on the front of your socket, and oftentimes that needs surgery. So, the full recovery time for him, if he had surgery, would be about 4 months. And so if he needs it, I'm sure they're going to do it now that they've won the World Series.
A lot of times when people have injuries, we see this a lot with leg injuries, right? When you're trying to take something off a muscle or something that you have injured, you end up kind of leaning too much on the other side and developing an issue there. Is that common with shoulder, your upper body, shoulders as well, where you're trying to use one side a little bit less and you end up damaging the other side or feeling that pain spreading?
It's unusual in the shoulder. No, I get you, because, you don't walk on your shoulders, right? And so it's unusual with the shoulder. But, yeah, Ohtani is obviously a tough guy. I think it's possible that they'll let this ride and see if he needs surgery on it. But if it's clear that it's torn off, it's much better. The guy's worth $700 million, right? So to just fix it rather than have him be halfway through the season and not be able to pitch the way he should pitch.
C.J. Mosley of the Jets, he was taken out of the game last week dealing with a neck injury. How concerned do all these players need to be when they're dealing with a neck injury, and how do they differ from others?
Yeah, it's very dangerous because the nerves that come out of your neck control your upper extremities, and they also could leave you paralyzed. So he's going to see a neck specialist, which means that this is not just a simple neck injury, and it's most likely a question as to what needs to be done. The nerves, they're discs between the bones in your neck, and those discs can protrude and push on the nerve roots. And if you get hit the wrong way, then, you can be a life-threatening situation. So until he sees the spine surgeon, all bets are off.
You mentioned paralyzation. Anybody who's been a football fan for long enough, right, is familiar with some of the guys we've seen over the years, Utley and some other guys that have been paralyzed, but we usually see that with a broken neck. Are you telling us you can end up being paralyzed just from nerve damage?
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
There's this thing called stenosis in your cervical spine where there's not enough space for the spinal cord, and if you take a bad hit, you can be paralyzed. Usually, it's a temporary paralysis, but it can be permanent, and obviously we don't want to take any chance with that.
Yeah, we want to ask you about Buccaneers Tykee Smith with a concussion. We saw in recent weeks Luke Gedeke on the offensive line was dealing with a concussion, and it just kept him out for a long time.
It was 4 weeks, I believe.
Yeah, a long time. How do these concussions differ, and why do some seem to linger way longer than others?
That is a great question. The concussion protocol, we have them do this neurologic testing after at least 24 hours to see if they can get back to their baseline functionality. So prior to the season, all the guys get tested so we know what their baseline neurologic function is. Not only do they get tested during the game to see if they can go back, but they start neurologic testing at least 24 hours later with a computerized system to see if they can come back. And why some people have slow recovery is complicated. If you've had a prior concussion, then the second concussion after that actually typically does more damage. And so that can be a slower recovery. And some people just neurologically and genetically are protected against concussions and some are not.
That's really interesting. Let me ask you this, because a lot of people played football in high school and never played again, right? Like when I was playing, like smashing your head into another dude's head was a form of celebration, right? I know we can't
absolutely
diagnose CTE or similar injuries like that prior to death, but are there signs, are there things that people should be watching for if they did play a violent sport earlier in life that maybe they should be worried about?
That is a fantastic question. I think that is on the mind of almost every, at least college player and probably a lot of high school players that had a bunch of concussions. There are some newer tests that they're running now that can help you diagnose it early. If you think you have it, you really should get to a concussion specialist. There's a couple concussion centers here in Tampa. The big one is at University of South Florida, and they can do a variety of tests if you think you have CTE to help you. There are treatments prior to death, obviously. So if you think you have it, get into one of the concussion centers.
Dr. Nofsinger, you always bring it on the show, and we really appreciate it. We love talking to you. That is Dr. Charles Nofsinger, the Pat and Aaron Show Injury Report presented by Tampa General Hospital in partnership with Florida Orthopaedic Institute. They provide you access to one of the top orthopedic programs in the nation. Schedule an appointment today at floridaortho.com. Dr. Nofsinger, thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks,
All right,
Doc.
have a good night.
Great stuff from Dr. Nofsinger, as always. They know their stuff over there, so if you're dealing with an injury, you know who to call.